If you compare the number of times I've been behind the camera versus in front of the camera, it's probably 1,000,000 to 1. Except for recording these types of interviews, being in front of the camera is not exactly my happy place. The conversation that I had today, though, challenges me to examine that feeling, and maybe it will for you too. Welcome to Pixels. I'm Beth Bilo, and I'm so glad you've joined me as we explore the heart and art of photography. Thanks for taking the time. I'm pleased to welcome Sara Kushner to the podcast. We talk about how she got started putting herself in the frame, why her work can't be classified as just glorified selfies, and what emotional and logistical and technical aspects that you might want to consider if you're thinking about trying out self-portraiture. And certainly, even if you have no interest in putting yourself in front of the camera, you're still going to learn some wisdom that will be useful when you are behind the camera. Sara Kushner is an environmental self-portrait photographer on a mission to make life a bit more playful. Through her lens, she celebrates the beauty of self-expression, body acceptance, and authenticity, inviting others to see the world in a new light. Her whimsical, vibrant self-portraits reflect her deep commitment to joy and her appreciation of the natural spaces in which she creates. Sara hopes her work will inspire others to embrace their true selves beyond societal expectations while appreciating and celebrating the unparalleled beauty found in nature. A very special thank you to my video editor extraordinaire, Alex Armitage, and Nick Stover of Nature Photography Classes, and their Inspired Creator Grant, which is a partial supporter of this channel. You can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspired-creator. And the link to that is in the show description. If you're listening to this on an audio-only platform, visit pixelspodcast.com and you can view the images from this episode on the episode webpage. Please let us know in the comments what you find meaningful or useful. Let us know, have you tried self-portraiture? If you haven't, does this inspire you to try it? What have you learned? How do you deal with interesting questions that you might get about it? Please do share, and we welcome your subscriptions, your shares, your likes, your comments. All of that helps this podcast to reach more people and hopefully benefit more photographers. Now, on to the conversation. Hi, Sara. Welcome to Pixels. I'm so glad that we are connecting. I think this is going to be a very different conversation, and I've been very much looking forward to it.
Thanks, Beth. I have also been looking forward to it.
Well, I'm curious, just to get us going, what's making you smile today?
Good question. I was thinking about this before you asked it, and the thing that popped into my mind instantly was last night at dinner, I was sitting across from my nephew. He is almost 5 years old. And I, at one point, had turned, I was talking to one of the other adults at the table, and I glanced over across the table just as my mind and my eyes were wandering. And I glanced over and he was drinking a cup of water, and the cup of water was so big on him that it was taking up everything on his face except his eyes. And he was just staring at me. And he was giving me this look that was part innocent, part mischievous. And it just brought me so much joy and kind of made me chuckle because, he's adorable. And because it was a really good reminder that kids see the world in a way that is so pure. And, they don't think about, something being weird or wrong or abnormal. They just do what feels right for them. And we just had this eye-to-eye connection, and I just had this whole kind of realization that, wow, he's just such a pure soul. And it was just really lovely. And so that is making me smile.
Oh, what a lovely moment that you'll probably treasure. And were you tempted to grab your phone and take a picture? Because I would have been. Which might ruin it.
Photographer. Well, exactly. Interestingly, despite the fact that I am a photographer and I do spend so much time with the camera on me, in my hand, next to me, no, I actually, my instinct was to just exist in the moment, which is rare for me.
Yeah. And what a gift that is. I was just talking with Alistair Ben, and he was saying, like, one way to kind of hone your vision and be more present is to actually go out into the landscape with no camera. And I was like, what? No, you can't do
Hmm.
that, but our impulse is to grab for it. But what to allow things to imprint themselves on us without having to put the lens in front of it.
Hmm.
There's a great joy in that.
There is. That is a lesson that I have had to learn over time. As somebody who has spent so much time with a camera in my hand from the time I was 15
Mm-hmm.
years old, or even younger than that, it has taken a long time for me to honor the fact that I can be totally in love with photography and want to do it all the time. And I'm also allowed to not do it. And that doesn't make
Yeah.
my experiences any less special.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it probably makes some experiences more special.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think we all have this image in our minds, and that's going to make everybody smile.
I hope
um,
so.
yeah, so the reason I've been looking forward to this conversation is there are multiple reasons, but one is your focus on I don't know if this is what you call environmental self-portraiture, where you are putting yourself in the environment and there seems to be sort of equal weight, or even more emphasis on the landscape, but with the context of that person and the
Mm-hmm.
energy they bring to it. And I've always been sort of a wait until the person gets out of the way before I take my picture,
Mm-hmm.
kind of nature photographer. So what was the catalyst for you deciding to put yourself in the frame?
It's a good question. I actually did not start out as an environmental portrait photographer. I started out as a self portrait photographer. That was
Mm-hmm.
kind of after some playing around, when I was little with my first camera with macro photography and, teaching myself manual mode and all of that. Self portraiture was really where I landed as my, this is the thing I'm meant to be doing. This is the thing that brings me the most peace and the most joy. But I did not start out doing it in nature. I started out when I was in high school. I, did not have reliable access to a car. I didn't have a lot of money. I couldn't just like go exploring in the woods or the mountains whenever I wanted. So I actually started taking photos of myself anywhere I could. I just felt so connected to it. It's kind of a weird and difficult feeling to explain because it is such a unique art form, but once I started doing it, I kind of have always known this is the thing that I need to do, and I needed to do it so badly back in those days that I would take a photo in my bedroom or in my
Mm-hmm.
backyard or in the driveway or wherever. Actually, one of my earlier photos was taken at my little brother's indoor soccer game. I had to go because I was part of the family and my brother's great. And it was, a good time. But for me, what made it a good time was not watching the soccer. It was setting up my tripod, in the bleachers and
Mm-hmm.
posing, and doing something that had people like looking like, does she know that she's at a sporting event? Like not an art studio. And I just always have felt this pull towards it. It took me a while to realize that I could go places, once I had the independence and, I'm now an adult, obviously, and I can go wherever I want and I do. And it took a long time for me to realize I didn't have to live my life in the traditional way. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
going as far as, I don't have to have a 9 to 5 job. I don't have to be like, hustling to get a raise. I don't have to be sleeping through sunrise because I'm so exhausted, things like that. I
Mm-hmm.
can support myself and also live this life where I'm kind of doing weird stuff and I'm waking up at 2 a.m. sometimes to go take photos for sunrise. And I'm, driving 3 hours just to get one photo and then driving all the way home. And I kind of had to free myself from, what was expected of me. And that is really when I started putting myself in these bigger landscape photos. I started going on more hikes. I started, seeing more nature and just everything kind of clicked. And I felt
Mm-hmm.
like this is what I meant to be doing. This is like I already knew that's what I was meant to be doing, but this was on another level. I love it. There's not really any other way to describe it. It just brings me so much joy. And interestingly, I think landscape photography is fantastic. I really admire people who take these beautiful landscape photos that look like they're from, the most beautiful version of our planet. And I
Mm-hmm.
never once considered taking a photo without myself in it. At least,
Hmm.
for my serious work that I sell that becomes part of my portfolio, all of that. I just needed to bring that extra piece. And, you
Yeah.
know, I'm alone a lot of the time. The extra piece is me by default. There's no one else really with me. Occasionally my husband, but he's not generally one to want to pose for photos. And it felt right. It just felt like I could simultaneously express myself and kind of be one with my environment and demonstrate the beauty of that environment, whether it's with my, my clothing, my posing, the composition, all of that. And I just feel like it needed that human element. It needed that element of emotion. I think nature is a really emotional place. And to me, one way that I express that is by putting myself in the photo, that I'm experiencing it along with the viewer. And that just feels really important to me.
To your recollection, have you always felt comfortable in front of the lens?
That's
Or
a really
did
good
you
question.
or did you find yourself needing to, like, at first uncomfortable and then needing to be, gradually more comfortable?
There are days when I still feel uncomfortable in front of the camera. And at the same time, I think I have always had some amount of comfort in terms of values. And that might sound a little obscure. So I will clarify and say that one of my values as a person is that all people, all bodies are worthy of love and respect. Even if we don't, necessarily like how they look on a given day or all the time or whatever it is, even if we are told by society that they need to change, I fervently believe that they do not need to change. And so from that perspective, I do feel like, of course, I belong in front of the camera because everyone does, because we're all worthy of that, right? No one needs to prove that this is a place that they belong. I would say I know that I sometimes can be kind of just a weird, awkward person, and I'm okay with that. And I love and accept myself for that. And when I'm posing, I do feel that that friction a little bit, that discomfort, where I'm kind of wanting to be graceful and maybe come across as, a thing or a person of wonder or awe or joy, because those are a lot of the times the things I'm feeling when I'm taking my photos. And sometimes I'll have 50 pictures of me doing really weird stuff with my hands, and then one picture of me where I look kind of graceful and kind of how I envisioned in my mind. That's something that I do struggle with, is putting the vision that I see in my head into my body. And I think being in nature actually does help with that, because it is so grounding to be there. But yes, I absolutely feel uncomfortable sometimes in that way. There's also a sense of discomfort when I'm at a place that's maybe a little bit more populated and somebody's watching me take photos.
Yeah.
And I actually have become very okay with that over the years. That's something that did take me a while to get used to. And now I feel confident enough in my work, and I know that I'm doing what I want to be doing, and they're doing what they want to be doing, and we both are allowed to exist together. It's when they come up and offer to take the photo for me that I kind of stumble a bit, and I'm like, oh,
I can understand.
Yeah, it's a really interesting experience. I actually one time had a girl insist so hard that I did let her press the shutter. I set up the shot and I went and posed, and I said, okay, thank you so much. It was very kind of you. And some people, I explain and they kind of make a face a little bit and then kind of walk away. I got a lot of really interesting comments, and that's something that you do kind of have to learn to be confident enough in yourself that people making comments or questioning you or giving you weird looks and outright staring. I wave to people a lot. If I see them staring from afar, I literally raise my hand and give them a wave, and they kind of laugh and see me as a human again. I think originally they see me kind of as a weird alien object thing, but as soon as I wave and make contact with them, I think they see me more as just a person creating art.
Yeah, nice. Well, it does seem very vulnerable. I mean, that's the word that I kept thinking of as I considered our conversation and your work. What is you've mentioned joy and peace, and I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that, because those seem like some benefits that you get. What are the benefits you get, and what are the benefits that you hope someone else looking at your work gets from that?
Yeah, it is really vulnerable. Even if I'm alone and safe and comfortable, it's vulnerable because I'm expressing an emotion. And anytime anyone expresses an emotion to someone else, it's vulnerable. Even if that person is yourself, a lot of times it's hard to even own your own emotions. So that is definitely something that I've had to and continue to work through, and maybe will always continue to work through. Again, there's always the potential for somebody to see me, judge me, laugh at me, whatever it is. And I have had all those things happen, and I keep going because I get so much out of it. I think the main thing, and I think the main reason I've stuck with it, is because of just the experience of being out there, of being both behind and in front of the camera. My brain gets completely absorbed in what I'm doing, and I kind of enter a flow state, which is rare for me. It's really hard for me to find that. And it happens most when I'm not paying attention. It doesn't happen when I go out and I say, okay, here's my exact location. Here's the exact framing that I want. The lighting has to be perfect. And I'm going to make myself enter that flow state. It really happens more in the unplanned moments, the unplanned photo shoots, when I just go out there and I'm, wearing whatever I'm wearing, maybe a flowy dress, and I'm kind of dancing around, and I lose track of all time, and maybe a couple hours go by, and I kind of wake up and I check my phone and I say, oh my gosh, I'm really hungry. I need to go eat now. It's that kind of magical way of existing that is so hard to find and so rare. And I would say that's the biggest benefit. It also is just so special spending time in nature. I often shoot without shoes on, and maybe you've heard of grounding, where there is some science to support that when you take off your shoes and you put your feet on the ground, on the earth, it really does bring a sense of peace, a sense of calm, a sense of, I have human worries, certainly like everyone else, but for this moment, I don't have to think about them. I can just kind of be here. In terms of what I would want viewers to get out of it, or what I hope they get out of it, I really want them to feel something, even if it's not what I felt when I was taking the photo. Sometimes I am feeling joy and wonder and awe and all of that. I mean, I feel that a lot of the time. Sometimes I'm feeling grief, and I need to go out there and express that emotion in front of the camera and move through that. Sometimes I'm feeling, tension or curiosity or any number of things. And maybe the viewer feels the same thing, and maybe they see that and they interpret it differently. And that is art, right? That is the beauty of art, is that you can feel whatever you need to feel, and it might help you, the viewer, move through some things, or just make you happy, make you smile when you look at it, which I also really appreciate. So that's one thing. I think I also want to inspire people to get out of their own comfort zone, whether it's taking self-portraits or not. Maybe it's trying a sport, or going up to a new person and introducing yourself, or, making a career move, whatever it is. I've certainly done a lot of that in my life. And I know I push myself to do it all the time with my photography. And if it inspires one person to go out and do one thing that's uncomfortable, I think that would make it worth it. I just think, life is a lot more fun than when you're doing things that are a little bit outside the norm. And I guess I'd say maybe the last thing is, I really like to surprise people. I've always kind of had this pride in being different, in doing things that are a little bit out of the ordinary. Every sport I've ever played, things I've done growing up and even now into adulthood are kind of things that are off the beaten path a little bit, including my photography. And there is a part of me that does sort of revel in the response I get when I tell somebody that I'm a self-portrait photographer. Because when you say you're a photographer, they say, oh, cool. Yeah, excellent. And then when you say that you're a self-portrait photographer, they're like, what? What is that? I didn't know that was a thing. And then I explain what I do and my process, and maybe I show them some photos. And I just really like kind of opening the door in people's minds to something unexpected, kind of doing what I can in a really small way to plant seeds that there are other ways to be in this world that are not just the norm.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I know, looking at yours, there is some sense of permission that I sense. And that's my personal response as someone who is not comfortable in front of the camera. Like, anytime I'm taking photos and somebody says, oh, let me get yours, I'm like, totally okay. No, no need. But you're offering a different perspective on what it can mean and what it can do for a person. That's very liberating.
It is liberating for me, and I hope for viewers as well.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at a few images, because I would love to share. And I think you've already alluded to one of them as we've been talking. So in terms of, these, I think these are pivot pixels, where they represent some shift in the way you were seeing yourself in your photography. So tell us about this first one.
Yeah, so this is the one that I was alluding to earlier, talking about how I got my start in the, environmental portrait photography that I do now. This was, as I said, taken at my little brother's indoor soccer arena during one of his games. These are the clothes I was wearing that day. I didn't put on anything special like I would do now. And I actually love this photo. I think this photo is me at 15 when I was doing this. This photo really speaks a lot about my life at the time. I never left home without my camera, whether I was going to school or, taking a walk or going on a hike or doing whatever I was doing. I almost always had it on me. And I was in it for the experimentation. I was really in this to see what I could make. And for me, there were no limitations to that. I could create at a soccer arena. I could create in my bedroom. I could create in the grass, right? Like whatever I had access to, I was going to make something there. And I was very committed to it and just loved it. And so, when I was in high school, I did a 365 self-portraiture project. I guess maybe I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't 15 in this. I was maybe 16. Because it was my senior year of high school. I did this
Okay.
project. I tried to do one self-portrait a year for 365 days. I think I made it up to day 224, maybe.
Wow.
Consistency. And I don't fault myself for this. Consistency has just never been my strong suit. Also one photo a day is a heck of a lot of photos. And I was, in
Yeah.
school and I was doing sports and I had all that, but I did a lot. And this was day 2. So this was the very, very, very beginning of my self-portraiture
Hmm.
journey. And I look back at this photo and just feel a lot of love for my young self.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So those that can't see it, if they're listening to the audio only version, we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing Sara. It's kind of interesting because you look like you're floating, but you're sitting on the end of a bench. Now I'm
Yes.
realizing you're at the end of
Mm-hmm.
a bench, and we only see, in terms of your face, we only see like just from the tip of your nose down. So we don't see the
Mm-hmm.
top of your nose, your eyes, or the crown of your head. Is there any, I assume that was intentional, or was it like, what, is there anything there, or am I just like barking up a wrong tree?
No, that is such a good question, Beth. I would really like to say it was intentional. And I do think to an extent it was. I think it was intentional in the way that I was playing around to see kind of the boundaries that I could push. Can I take
Mm-hmm.
a really well composed, nice looking photo without having my eyes in it? Does that add maybe an air of mystery? I remember showing
Mm-hmm.
this to my photography class in high school and having someone comment on my hands and how they were
Mm.
very, they're kind of tense, right? It looks like they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to express something.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
looking back, I really want to say I wanted to draw attention to that. I didn't want my eyes to be the focus. To be honest, I don't remember exactly what I was thinking when I took this photo. So these are all just, me trying to project on younger me here. But that's certainly what I get out of it now, that
Yeah.
there's a lot you can express without making eye contact. And I do think, also it's kind of unrelated, but as a neurodivergent person, eye contact is something that sometimes I do struggle with. And so this does feel like a
Mm-hmm.
very authentic photo for me, that I can use other parts of my body to, get the message across.
Yeah. If you're neurodivergent, because you had shared, I hope it's okay, like ADHD
Of
as
course, yeah.
being, yeah, part of your makeup. Eye contact, for neurodivergent is vulnerable. It's also vulnerable for neurotypical. You think of eye contact like the windows to the soul,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing the eyes. And so somehow, even learning that you were 16 or so in this, it kind of makes sense. Like at least when I think of my 16-year-old self, and
Mm-hmm.
having some level of self-consciousness, especially if a camera was pointed at me, but it's okay. But the eyes there's something more intimate about
Mm-hmm.
them being in the photo. Very, very good. Well, let's take a look at your next one.
Yes, this one. I mean, if you want to talk about vulnerability, I
Yes,
remember in the moment
absolutely.
this photo being extremely vulnerable to take. I'm, wearing this dress, it's kind of sleeveless, but the straps are kind of coming down. It was downpouring during this photo. I got really
Mm.
creative and stacked like 4 towels on top of my camera so that it didn't get hurt. This was before like weather resistant cameras were around. You can actually see in my right hand, I'm actually holding my remote for my camera, which I find so humorous because
I can
this
see it.
photo is otherwise a very emotional photo. It's raining, it's dark, it's cloudy. I'm wearing black. My face is a little bit, you can kind of make assumptions about this photo. You can
Mm-hmm.
kind of tell yourself any story that you want about this photo, which is why I really like it.
Yeah.
And then here's my remote, just couldn't even be bothered to Photoshop it out. Totally forgot. Or maybe I thought it would blend into my black dress. I'm not totally sure.
It kind of does. It kind of does.
It
I
kind of
did
does.
not notice it, at least on the screen, the way I'm looking at it,
Mhm.
until you mentioned it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can kind of see that.
Yeah, this was a little bit later on in my 365 project. I had kind of started experimenting with a little bit more, nature focus. This was taken in my backyard. And I really did want to express a strong emotion. I wanted to express, yes, vulnerability, but also just the fact that I, a teenager, had these really strong emotions and didn't really know what to do with them. And this was
Mm-hmm.
one of my solutions of what to do with them, was to take this photo. And And now looking back, I'm thinking, wow, that was really gutsy of me as a teenager to
Yeah.
take this and then, show this in my critique for my photo class and post it on Flickr back when Flickr was around and all
Hmm.
of that. And this is really, I think even at this age, at the very beginning of my journey, I was really already embracing the vulnerability and the openness needed to do this work.
Yeah, yeah. Because while it's vulnerable, there is definitely confidence, if that makes sense. There's a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
a paradox in what we're looking
Yeah,
at.
which I think
Um,
is a really accurate way to describe self-portraiture on the
mm,
whole, vulnerable
hmm
and confident. You kind of need them both to do this kind of
hmm
art. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
And then this third one, I'm thinking represents another evolution, because it's quite different than the other two.
Yes, this one was actually taken just in the past 5 years since I moved to Seattle, where I live now. And this photo was kind of me. I feel like it was me kind of breaking out of my permissive shell. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I should say that a different way. Giving myself permission to take a photo like this, which is,
Mm-hmm.
I had for a while admired photos like this, other artists who were maybe doing similar work or going to places that were just so beautiful and they just didn't seem accessible to me for a
Mm-hmm.
variety of reasons. And, I had actually, in moving to Seattle to do this, I had taken a big leap. I had quit my job. I was changing careers. Really, there was a lot going on in my life at the time. I was in a big place of transition. And this photo really feels like the beginning of my self portrait photography journey as I know it today. This feels like, I had bought this dress to wear for the photo. I had
Mm.
waited for this cloudy night with this amazing sunset. And I just feel like this is what I was waiting for. There was something in me that really had wanted to do this for a long time. And I was just, again, taking a more traditional route. When I traveled, I was mostly going to cities. I wasn't really spending a lot of time in nature. I did
Mm-hmm.
have this, prior to this move, I did have this job that was kind of keeping me in the office all day long. And so this feels like both a visual and an emotional representation of me kind of reaching for, if you will, something
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. And you're reaching in the photo and reaching towards the light.
Yeah.
There's a lot of symbolism, it feels like, in this. Yeah, beautifully done. And I don't know if this next one is part of the pivot or if it's just another illustration of the work that you do. So maybe let's talk
Yeah.
about this one for a second.
Sure. Yeah. I would say it's maybe a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
This one is part of the pivot in that this was taken during a solo camping trip that I did a couple summers ago. Maybe my second solo camping trip that I had ever done. I didn't start doing them until I moved to Seattle. I grew up camping with my family, and then now in Seattle, I take my husband camping way more than he wants to. But this was one of my first times saying, you know what? I'm available on this, Friday, whatever day it was. I would like to go. It feels very important to me, and I'm going to just make time for this. I'm going to just prioritize this. I
Mm-hmm.
remember this is at Mount Rainier National Park. I had
Mm-hmm.
reserved a site and I slept in my hammock that night for the first time
Mm-hmm.
ever. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was so freeing and fun and cozy. And I just love hammocks. That's unrelated. And
Same.
this photo, I actually woke up at 2:30 a.m. in the park. I woke up, it was pitch black out. This is after having gone to bed at 7 p.m. And I packed up all my stuff by myself. I drove halfway around the mountain to get to this hike that I wanted to do. And I was essentially alone on this sort
Mm-hmm.
of mountaintop. People were kind of passing by to get to their destinations, but no one really stuck around to
Mm-hmm.
watch the sunrise like I was doing. And it just felt really, really freeing to be alone, literally on a mountain. The breeze was blowing, the sun was rising. It was really beautiful. I felt like I was just on top of the world. And it kind of, I do sometimes go through these kind of mini evolutions lately in self portraiture where I feel like I unlock kind of another level. And this
Mm-hmm.
definitely felt like that for me, that I was again unlocking this ability to really be alone. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're really not that many people around, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had to prove to myself, I can do this. And I also got to experience an amazing sunrise, which is a big part of why I do what I do now, is to be in nature. And it was just, yeah, a really lovely day.
What you're sharing is making me think about a question that I've been sitting with, which is around how much we tell about our photos, or how much we describe, what's the story,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
context, the emotion, any of that. And since yours are so personal, what is your feeling about how much you tell about one of your images and how it was created, what your intention was, that sort of thing?
I love that question. And it feels very hard to answer because I
Mm.
kind of go back and forth. I like sharing about my photos. I like talking about the experience because I do feel like it gives the photo context.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I often don't share, I might share part of the experience. I might share about where I was or what kind of led me to that place, or if it's an idea I'd had for a while, I talk about that. But I don't often share the nitty gritty. Here's exactly what I was going through in my life, what I was
Mm.
feeling that led step by step to the point of me creating that photo, because I want the viewer to see what they want to see in it.
Mm-hmm.
Taking the photo itself, taking it, if there was a hike involved, setting up my camera, doing the settings, being in front of the camera, and then going home to edit and creating sort of the image that I see in my head of the photo. All
Mm-hmm.
of that is so satisfying to me that I don't often feel a need, I think, to really describe word for word what was happening in my mind. Yeah, I think I want the viewer to kind of decide. And there is a part of it too that it is a very personal art, like you said.
Yeah.
And there is a part of me that does think, some things are maybe better left kind of in my mind.
Yeah. Very good. Very good point. Because I'm thinking about that photo, the one of the ones with your 365 project, the second one with
Mm-hmm.
the where you're more
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable in the rain and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. And part of me wants to know what was happening with her,
Mm-hmm.
what spurred that emotion. And then another part is like, how do I interpret that, what I'm seeing, and what does that
Mm-hmm.
say about how I'm feeling right now?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what does it tell me about my own emotional state?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for you as the viewer, that's way more powerful. It's
Mm-hmm.
not up to me to dictate how you should feel about a work of
Yeah.
art. And so I think
Yeah.
it's enough to just have had the experience and to be able to share it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, I want to ask something before I ask another question. um, because this just keeps coming up, and I know I keep coming back to that vulnerability
Mm-hmm.
piece, but it seems like self-portraiture would be a lot of things all at once. It would be intimidating, maybe uncomfortable. It would also be
Mm-hmm.
empowering and healing. And it
Yeah.
seems like those are all things that can exist
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. They're not contrary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not thinking like, if you're going to do this, you need to go through therapy or something. That's not necessarily it, but it does strike me as something that, depending on your own relationship with yourself, your own relationship with your
Mm-hmm.
self-image, that it
Mm-hmm.
could bring some things up. It could activate some things. So what would you
Mm-hmm.
recommend to someone who's maybe considering this, that they consider from an emotional perspective if they're thinking about
Mm-hmm.
giving this a try?
Go in with zero expectations. I don't always do that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and I know I'm saying something that is very difficult to do. I'm asking a lot right off the bat to go in and not have any expectations, because we all have expectations, whether we want to or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that the times when I go in thinking, you know, this location is so beautiful, I have to take the most stunning image I've ever taken in my entire life, I'm
Yeah.
very disappointed most of the time. I'm frustrated. I find myself not enjoying the moment as much, not actually being in the
Mm-hmm.
experience. I'm more focused on why I can't, get the composition perfectly right, when really it'll come when it comes. And if not, that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken me a long time to learn that. And I often still, forget sometimes. And I get sucked into my own inner critic. So I think that would be my very, very first piece of advice is to just go in and be open to having an experience that's beautiful. And, kind of as a result, your photo will be beautiful in a way, even if it's not the exact thing that you imagined. And the other part of that is going in with no expectations does help you focus more. At least for me, it helps me focus more on my feelings and the experience I'm having. And wow, that mist is so pretty. And oh my gosh, this grass
Mm-hmm.
feels really soft under my feet. And I just really want to give myself a big hug right now. And, that will show up sometimes in my posing, in my, the way that I show up in front of the camera, when I'm able to let go of kind of my perfectionism, which I'm always,
Mm-hmm.
on a journey to let
Mm-hmm.
go of. So I would say that would be my first my first piece of advice. I sometimes, if I'm having sort of a block, or if I'm not feeling the most inspired, or if I don't really know what to do with my body, I do sometimes give myself a little prompt. And I do this too. I do take photos for clients, and in my style, and I do tell them the same thing. I might give myself a prompt
Mm-hmm.
like, what would power look like in my body?
Mm.
What would
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability look like? What would joy look like? What would grief look like? Right. And those are
Mm-hmm.
four very different emotions, and they look different when I try to put them in my body. So, whereas grief might be curling up in a ball, or, kind of being more closed off, joy
Mm-hmm.
would be really, I envision it as more, arms out, open, hands
Yeah.
facing out. So I do sometimes try to channel in words what I'm feeling, so that I can then kind of move that into my body. I would also be prepared to maybe get some questions from
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
innocent bystanders who have not seen what you're doing before and are curious about it. If that makes
Yeah.
you super, super uncomfortable, because I understand that that would be a deal breaker for some people, I'd recommend either going somewhere less crowded or going at sunrise, which is the best
Mm.
time for photos anyways. But
Mm-hmm.
go early in the day so that people are not out.
Yeah.
I'm thinking also of sort of a more technical bit of advice, at least based on how
Sure.
I take photos, because people ask me
Yeah,
often,
please.
how do you even do this?
Yeah.
I do have a tripod, and
Mm-hmm.
I obviously have my camera. When I first started, as you saw from that second Pivot Pixels photo, I did used to shoot with a remote that I would point at my camera, but the range was really short. I think it was 15 meters or something. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I wanted to be much farther away in my photos than I could be. So I ended up
Yeah.
switching to an intervalometer system. I'm currently shooting with a camera that has a built-in intervalometer, so I don't have to bring any extra equipment. But if you
Yeah.
don't have that, and what I used to do before I got my current camera is I bought an external intervalometer that you can just plug in to your camera, and you can set
Mm-hmm.
it to take, I take one photo every 2 seconds, every 3 seconds, depending on my mood. And you can set it to take as many as you want. So I might set it for unlimited photos until I decide I'm done, or I might set it to take 40 photos and then kind of go back and check my work. So I also often do use somebody as a stand-in. So if I'm able to drag my husband along,
Mm.
I'll have him stand
Great
in the
idea.
frame so that I can frame it up rather than having to guess, which I do a lot of guessing and it's fun.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
easier if you do have a person or a tree or a backpack or anything that you can use to frame up your shot.
Oh, yeah, great. Because I was just imagining like running back and forth, like, and using like
Yes.
X marks the spot of where I need to be around, in order to be in the
Mm-hmm.
frame. Um,
Yes, and don't get me wrong, I still do that sometimes, which is part of the fun, it's just all part of the
yes.
experience.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, the only self-portraiture I've done, this was a challenge that a friend and I did. We were doing like a new theme every week or something, and we did self-portrait. And all I was doing was like the tripod there and me here. And I was
Mm-hmm.
still like running back and forth. Although I think I flipped out my
You flipped your camera out. Yeah.
the viewfinder, and that
Mm-hmm.
helped. But it was still, it was a lot of work just to
It's a
just
lot.
to do that right there. So when you add all of the different variables that you're talking about, yeah, it's having your husband as an assistant sounds like a really nice thing.
It is nice. Unfortunately, he is not a morning person. So if
Ah,
I ever want
well
to do a
then,
sunrise shoot, he's a lost cause. He is
yeah,
dead to the world.
yeah.
So
So the backpack has
um,
to stand in.
backpack, or I do shoot in the woods a lot of the time. Some of my more
Mm-hmm.
local closer to Seattle places where I go if I don't have the time, or if I don't feel like going to a national park. I do a lot of in the woods type things, and trees
Yeah.
are a really, really excellent framing device.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Well, what do you feel like has been the most surprising thing that you have experienced or discovered since you really fully committed down this path of self-portraiture?
I think it's the response from others.
Hmm.
I think it's, yes, I get a ton of surprise, a ton of curiosity, a ton of, wow, how do you do that? And a lot of support. I get a lot
Mm-hmm.
of, wow, this is beautiful. Or I actually, it comes via my mom a lot of the time. She will show my work to her friends or her colleagues or other people in her life. And then she'll text me and say, I showed your work to this person and they were so impressed and they really loved it. And, I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram. That's where I share the majority of my work these days. And I, have people that I've connected with on there. Some of them are fellow photographers, some even fellow self-portrait photographers. And so there's a level of expectation there that a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
people in that space are going to see my work and accept it and appreciate it. So it really is
Mm-hmm.
most surprising when it comes from people who have no affiliation to photography or
Yeah.
self-portraiture specifically, who are just kind of living their lives, not expecting to see a girl posing in a dress on a mountaintop. And then they do, and they think, wow,
Right.
that's really amazing. And
Yeah.
those kinds of comments and feedback just really make me feel really happy and appreciative and grateful for the work that I do, because, in a small way, I am in those instances kind of planting seeds and showing people
Yes.
that that things are possible that maybe they hadn't considered before.
Yeah. Well, along with the support, I know one thing you shared with me in one of our exchanges that some people will say like, well, isn't this just a glorified selfie? How do you differentiate between what you're doing and like what an influencer is doing when they pose themselves in front of a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful sunset or something like that?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I think, unintentionally block that particular feedback out because it, no, I don't think people mean this intentionally, but it does kind of feel diminishing a little bit when somebody
Yeah.
says, "Oh,
Yeah.
aren't you just trying to be an influencer?" And
Right.
no, I'm not. I'm not trying to do that. I started doing this 16 years ago before influencers were even a thought in anyone's mind. And I've gotten that comment before from people I know, from people on social media. I got it once from somebody who I was trying to pitch an idea to. I was trying to pitch a workshop idea to teach self-portraiture, and those were almost this person's exact words. Yeah, and they're all learning opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to explain as best I could about what makes my work different, and I think part of it is that I'm not creating for social media. I'm not creating
Mm-hmm.
so that I can post it and get a bunch of likes and shares and sponsors and all those things. I mean, those things are certainly a tool that a lot of photographers use to support themselves, and I'm not opposed to that. I certainly
Right.
need to support myself as well, but that's not the goal. I mean, if I share a photo and nobody likes it, that's okay. It might
Yeah.
still be one of my favorite photos, and I still see the value in it, and I think that's a really big difference. I think another one
Yeah.
is that I spend a lot of time, and this is, I guess, going to be me making a huge assumption. But I spend a lot of time on the act of creation. I put a lot of
Yeah.
intention into where I'm going to go, what time I'm going to go, what I'm going to wear, what's the weather like, all of that. And I do sometimes kind of like to wait for the right moment, and it's not always
Mm-hmm.
the right moment to take the photo. And I don't, I guess, push myself to create if it's not right, if it's not
Mm.
feeling right. Because again, I'm just doing it, I'm doing it for my audience and for viewers and for people to be impacted, hopefully, but I'm really also doing it for myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, and again, the assumption there was that maybe creators are doing it on schedule, right? Are doing it, for the act of creation, which is also fantastic and can be joyful for people. But I guess my priority is the art, not
Yeah. Yeah.
what happens after.
Yeah. Thank you for that distinction. And the other thing that comes up is, as you're describing that, is that I see an influencer as doing it for, yes, the external validation, but it's much more like, look at me and
Mm-hmm.
how cool I am for being in this place or in
Mm-hmm.
this setting or with these people,
Yeah.
as opposed to, I don't look at your images and think you're saying, look at me and
Mm-hmm.
how amazing I am. It's
Yeah.
it's a bigger picture.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. That means a lot. And that is what I would hope,
Mm-hmm.
to come up to put across. I guess one way that actually shows up visually in my photos is that I often find myself gravitating towards wearing colors that kind of match my surroundings.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
which sometimes I don't. Sometimes I really want a contrast, right? I love,
Mm-hmm.
wearing a red dress in a green forest because to me that shows a different kind of vibrancy. But I
Mm-hmm.
also, one of my favorite photos I've taken this year is I'm actually wearing a green dress in a green forest. I feel such a deep sense of connection to the places where I'm taking photos that I just want to kind of become a part of them. I love this photo. This photo brings me
Yeah,
so
that's
much joy.
beautiful.
Thank you. I had an amazing time taking this. This is actually taken, my in-laws were in town in Seattle and they
Mm.
asked to accompany me on a self-portrait trip because they wanted to know what I do.
How lovely.
It was really lovely. And I wasn't really expecting to create any of my greatest works, because I was wanting them to have the experience and wanting to kind of show them and demonstrate. And I ended up taking this photo and kind of, it really reminded me as I'm so often reminded that the best photos sometimes come when you have zero expectations. This was a,
Yes.
demonstrative sort of self-portrait session, and look what happened. And
Yeah.
in this photo, I felt really strongly that I wanted to wear this green dress because I felt so connected. This is one of my favorite places. I come to this park actually quite frequently for photos, and I always just feel a deep sense of belonging there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I oftentimes do try to sort of blend in. This one, you almost have to actually, I had somebody, a family member of mine, looking at this photo last night on his phone and saying, "Where are you? I can't see you in this photo." And because I'm so
Hmm.
blended in, and I'm, much farther from the camera than I am in many of the others. And I'm wearing a dress that matches these trees exactly. And that is actually
Yes.
what I wanted to convey, is that,
Yeah.
in my other life, maybe I was a tree. I don't know.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I just felt this connection. And that, as you said, it's not about look at me in this cool place. It's about
Mm-mm.
feel the emotion, right? Feel whatever
Yeah.
you need to feel in response to this photo. And maybe having a human element. I almost said elephant. Maybe having a
My mind goes in
maybe
different
having
directions
a
when you say that. They're all self-deprecating, so I'm not going to go there. But
I
yes.
appreciate that. But yes, maybe having a human element in the photo, will help draw out that emotion. And that is really,
Yeah.
one of my goals.
Yeah, it absolutely adds to the story. And I can see this photo being beautiful without the human element, but adding
Mm-hmm.
that human element changes it dramatically and makes it much more powerful. And here's one where you're very contrasted.
Yes,
Red dress in the ice.
one of my other favorite photos from this year. This photo feels really nostalgic to me. It feels like
Hmm.
I'm, I'm wanting to look at this photo and be cozy under a blanket with hot chocolate and the fireplace going, and maybe we're roasting marshmallows, and maybe we just went sledding or some fun adventure that you might do when you're a kid. This photo
Yeah.
brings all of that kind of forward for
Mm.
me. And this is one that I really just did want, like, bright and bold and colorful and vibrant, and kind of bringing back that sort of childlike joy that I'm kind of always seeking in my life in a
Hmm.
variety of ways, which
Hmm.
is maybe why the thing that made me smile today was my 5-year-old
Your
nephew who's
nephew.
staring at
Yes,
me.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's sad a lot of the time that we grow up. We grow up. I'm saying that in quotes because what is growing up? I've talked to
Right.
90-year-olds who say, I don't feel grown up, but we are meant to grow up, and we are kind of told that we need to lose this part of us, that we can't be
Hmm.
functioning, successful adults if we are still wanting to play and, have fun and be vibrant and go sledding and, be silly and roast marshmallows and all of those things. And I strongly disagree with that. I think,
Hmm.
you need to have kind of joy and vibrancy and silliness, and you need to be able to, to play, to kind of let yourself be yourself, even if other people think it's weird or childlike. There's something
Right.
wrong with being like a child. People always say children are so wise, and they just go with their gut and they're so intuitive, and I want to be like that. I think
Yeah.
everyone might benefit from being like that a little bit more. So this photo really encompasses that, a lot of that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to just check you were not barefoot during this, I hope.
Thank you for asking. I do not shoot barefoot in the snow.
Good. Good.
No, this was I was wearing my snow boots or my
Yeah.
yeah, we snowshoed, and I took off the snowshoes so that I could take this photo. I was wearing
Yeah.
my snow boots, and my feet were, I think I even had foot warmers in. My feet get
Oh,
actually
good.
very cold.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so I was warm. But that's
Yeah.
actually a part of the reason why I really like shooting in my longer dresses in the winter, because I do want
Hmm.
to keep that sort of fantastical, magical, natural feeling element. And for me
Yes.
personally, I feel like having hiking boots with micro spikes on them, or snowshoes or something like that, or the fact that you can, if you could see that I'm wearing like 3 layers of pants under this dress, would ruin the magic
Right.
a little bit. So
Exactly.
yes, I kind of am strategic in that way. But yes, thank you for
Yeah.
asking. I was well protected.
Oh, good, good. Because that's another technical aspect for people to consider,
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bit
Oh,
of smoke and
definitely.
mirrors, right? That
Yes.
happen
Oh, I
to
mean,
keep us
a little
safe
bit.
and warm.
Yes. And I do always have either my husband or just my stuff in a pile. I've got my jacket waiting for me. I've got hand warmers in my
Yes.
pockets. I've got a hat. Especially in the snow, I am very careful to bundle up between every single set, when I'm looking at
Yeah.
photos. And then I quick unbundle, do a minute long shoot, come back, bundle up again.
Mm.
To be clear, I'm not out here risking my limbs and my phalanges to get the photo.
Yes. Yeah. Good, 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 good. Because I could see, you get well, like you were saying before, you lose track of time. And I have found myself like
Yes.
getting into a groove of something and not noticing I'm in pain or, there's
Yes.
something
Yes.
happening. And
I
so,
absolutely,
oof,
yes. In that flow state,
yeah,
I do sometimes experience this sort of feeling of invincibility against weather. And I
right,
only
right.
notice it when my husband, who's, he was with me at this location and he was like, "Aren't you freezing?" And I was like, "What do you mean? I'm totally fine. I'm wearing a
Mm-hmm.
t-shirt basically, but I'm great." And then I, of course, go to pack up my stuff and I'm like, my fingers are so cold. I can't close my tripod. So yes, I do take precautions, and it's important. It's important to keep yourself safe as you can
Safe.
be.
So you've shared a little bit that I already, but just to maybe bottom line it, what would you challenge anyone watching this? And I kind of use that word challenge specifically because at least for me it would be a challenge. It would definitely be a
Mm-hmm.
stretch. But
Mm-hmm.
what kind of challenge would you lay down to us that would help us to stretch
Mm-hmm.
creatively?
I feel the need to start and directly address your comment. You've mentioned that self-portraiture or being in photos in general is a thing that's uncomfortable for you.
Mm-hmm.
You very cleverly did not make an allusion to anything when I said the word elephant. And those are things that my brain is trained to pick up on. In my other
Yep.
life, I am an anti-diet, weight-inclusive registered dietitian, and I work with people specifically on body image and self-acceptance and self-love, even, all of that sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing. This idea that all bodies are worthy and we don't need to change our bodies to be worthy, to be respected and loved. And that is a hard message for a lot of people to hear. I mean, I see, I see clients one-on-one. I do individual counseling, and those are people who generally are wanting to move in that direction. They're wanting
Mm-hmm.
to seek healing and to do the work and move through, they're in some cases self-loathing or self-hatred
Mm-hmm.
or, these
Mm-hmm.
highly negative feelings toward themselves. Then there are people who they wait a long time to even reach out. They think it's too hard. They think it's not worth it. They think they need to be fixed. They don't. No one needs to be fixed. Everyone, you can be whole. What whole looks like is different for every person. And that's a big barrier that I see a lot. And it's even, my clients in session will say things like, I was having a really fantastic day until I saw a photo of myself and then I hated it and
Mm-hmm.
then everything was
Yeah.
terrible. And, if you're wanting to do this type of art, that is a real barrier. That is a real
Mm-hmm.
sticking point for a lot of people. And, people hear what I do and they often say, "Oh my gosh, I could never do that." Like, good for
Right.
you. But, oh no, gross is sort of the feeling. I, first of all, want to give them a giant hug and say, it's okay. You are beautiful. I know that's a barrier. And so I think opening yourself up to the message that you are enough, that
Mm-hmm.
in looks, in intelligence, in personality, in whatever it is that you feel, wherever it is that you feel you're not enough, you are. And I really mean that very genuinely. I know that sounds very specific to self-portrait photography, but I actually think it's relevant in all types of art and creation, because if we feel like we are not enough, there is, and I've experienced this too. I'm not without, body image struggles and perfectionism, like I mentioned, and feeling like I
Mm-hmm.
need to do it exactly right. I certainly am, I work through those things too. And I have been for a long time. I've noticed that in the moments where my self-doubt gets loud, I either don't want to go out at all to take photos. I feel like it's not worth my time, or I go out and I'm not pleased with anything I make.
Yeah.
Whether that's because the photo is actually not good or because of my mood, it's anyone's guess. But I think a big part of it has to do with that sort of self-directed negativity has a really big impact on our mental health and our creativity. And it can oftentimes create these blocks where we are not able to access our creativity fully because we're so overwhelmed with these like self-directed like feelings that
Yeah.
we're not enough, or we're wrong, whatever it is. And letting go of that can be really powerful and hard. We don't get that messaging a lot of the time from mainstream media or social media, or a lot of times people in our lives who mean well, certainly, but we are
Yeah.
not often confronted with the message that it is okay to just be
Mm-hmm.
the way that we are. And I think exposing yourself to that message, however you can, whether it's listening to this podcast perhaps, or,
Yeah.
or seeking out somebody new on social media, somebody who is advocating for, liberation of whatever sort, feels relevant to you, can be helpful to just kind of get your eyes in front of some new material, even if it's different from what your family thinks or what your friends think or any of that. I think also giving yourself permission to fail or be wrong. I mean, that is creativity, right? Creativity
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
doing something that has maybe not been done before or not been done in the way that you are doing it. And a lot of times people might initially react to that in a negative way. It takes
Mm-hmm.
people time to get used to new things, and that's okay because you're not
Yeah.
creating for other people necessarily. You're creating
Right.
for you.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, if we go back to the conversation about social media and influencers, it's hard to remember that sometimes in the era of influencer culture and everyone doing it for the likes and for the attention. And it can be really hard to say, well, actually what feels right to me is to make a giant scribble on a piece of paper, and
Yeah.
like see what happens from there. Even if that's like, again, like childlike or messy or weird or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, it doesn't have to look like what other people are doing. And in fact, if it's true creativity, it won't usually look like what other people
Yeah.
are doing.
I feel like
Yeah.
you've taken a look at my sketchbooks. Because there's a lot of scribbles. There's a lot of scribbles and circles and hot messes. I think that's for me anyway, that's been part of my gateway to being able to be playful and release expectations and not care what other people think because it's just for me. I'm not showing it to anyone. I'm still experiencing how that might translate and move out into my photographic expressions. But it's funny that you said that about scribbling in a book on a piece of paper because it seems silly, but it's like, it's very liberating to just allow yourself to do that without any expectations.
Yeah, because when you're scribbling in a sketchbook, maybe you're not planning on showing that to anyone. And you can treat photography the same way. And you can share
Mm-hmm.
it, certainly, if you want. And you
Right.
don't have to. You can just create and create and create and feel satisfied with that. This is a huge tangent, but I just popped into my head and I feel the need to say this out loud. You used the term smoke and mirrors, I think, when we were
Oh,
talking about
yes. Yes.
the frozen photo with the red dress.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got this very strong urge to clarify that
Yeah.
there is maybe some smoke and mirrors around what I'm wearing. I'm wearing shoes a lot of times. I'm wearing
Right. Right.
multiple layers of pants. I'm wrapping myself up in a jacket, but the emotions that I'm expressing are real.
Oh, yeah.
That there
Absolutely.
is, the smoke and mirrors is more, how do I not freeze to death? But everything
Exactly.
else about that is very, very authentic. And I don't think
Yes.
that was assumed to be otherwise, but I felt like I should have said that in the moment. And I just did
Yeah,
not
no,
think of that.
I heard a catch as you were responding, and I thought that probably wasn't the right phrase to use,
No,
because
that's okay.
it can imply trickery, right? Or
Yeah.
inauthenticity. And I was
Yes.
thinking more like there's a hidden element that's not obvious
Yes.
that allows
Yes.
for a fuller expression of something, so that it's
Yes,
not
it looks
distracting.
whimsical, and it is
Yeah,
whimsical, but
yeah,
also I wear this long
yeah.
dress because I'm wearing many pants
Yes.
underneath.
Yes. I'm glad you circled back to that because also the other thing that's been popping through my head is just, is AI and people's,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
distrust of what they're seeing and thinking that there's smoke and mirrors or, whatever it is. And that goes to how much do you tell about this particular photograph and the
Yes.
story and how you got there and the emotion and all of that, because
Mm-hmm.
I do think that story, whatever story the artist wants to tell about their work it's part of us personalizing and authenticating the experience and the work
Yeah,
itself. And we have to decide
absolutely.
how much we want to say,
Yes, and that is
as you
really
were saying.
hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as somebody who does the kind of work that I do, I never use AI. I never generate
Right.
backgrounds. And certainly people
Mm-mm.
do that. And there are some really, really talented visual artists out there who create these really wondrous works. And they do include the use of AI. And I have,
Mm-hmm.
respect for that as sort of a separate art form. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not my art form.
Right.
Everywhere, every location that you see in one of my photos is a place that I really was. That is the photo as it was taken. I don't add things that weren't there. I don't like move myself in the frame. I don't do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally, I will take out some spots if there's some
Oh
annoying
yeah,
little flecks or if there's bugs or if there's whatever. I, of course,
definitely.
I clean it up in that way, but I'm not creating something that wasn't there to begin with. And there actually
Yeah.
are other photographers who do similar things to what I do. And they have to now put in their Instagram bios, not AI, all real photos. And I've
Hmm.
not yet done that.
Well, it can verge over into defending your work in some
Yeah.
way.
Yes.
Um, and so I think we're learning about all sorts of lines
Yes.
that are being drawn, that we have to decide
Mhm.
how close are we to them, where do we cross them, what do we say about them, how much do we trust ourselves,
Yeah.
our viewer.
Yes.
It's very
Yes.
complicated. It's very
Yeah. And I want to
complicated.
trust my viewers. I would love to
Yeah.
believe that they see my photos and they hear maybe the little I share about them and they think,
Hmm.
wow, what a spectacular place. This
Yeah.
makes me feel, a certain way. This makes me really react to this.
Hmm.
Um, and no one's ever commented on my work specifically to say, is this like, is this real
Hmm.
in a way, meaning like, I
Hmm.
don't think you actually were here. It may happen eventually. Who knows? And
I
then I
was
will
going to
have to figure
say,
out how to communicate that.
I think it's coming for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for that. That it wasn't a tangent, I should say. I think it was very relevant. So thanks for circling back to that.
Yeah.
Are there any resources that you find yourself recommending to people
Mm.
repeatedly, photography related or not, that you think are useful to us as creatives?
Well, the Pixels podcast, obviously, that's an easy one.
Obviously, obviously.
Otherwise, I would say it's kind of context dependent.
Hmm.
One thing that I find myself talking about a lot, and it comes up sometimes in the context of my photo work, sometimes just when I'm feeling kind of in this mood. But I read a lot of fantasy books,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I also kind of
Hmm.
I like to see my work as almost like bringing fantasy to life. I mean, again, in the context of being in real places and things like
Right,
that,
right.
I find that there's a lot of real magic there in those places
Hmm.
when you're feeling like, how is this real? It is real, but how? Like, how am I lucky enough to be experiencing this right now? And I do sometimes, I just love fantasy novels for the escapism and,
Hmm.
for all of that. I can read them sitting on my couch in my very real home with walls and a TV and a ceiling and all of that. And also I'm the kind of sort of fantastical person that believes that those things in a way can be real. That
Hmm.
maybe not in the same way. I mean, I can't just like hop on a dragon and fly away, although how cool would that be? But
Right.
I can, go to a national park that feels like it's out of this world and
Hmm.
be there and experience it and take a photo and just have feelings about it. And those things to me feel kind of related because I do feel like I'm creating the fantasy that exists in my mind with my
Hmm.
photos sometimes. And that just feels really powerful. So I think I wouldn't say that I necessarily draw inspiration as far as, you know, the clothes or anything like that. Although,
Hmm.
I mean, I do wear dresses and I get some fantasy books. Sometimes they do too, but it's the mood for me. It's the feelings of this place is literally magical and I can kind of
Yeah.
make my world magical too. Well, it's funny now because this is what I this is what I had in mind, and now I'm thinking back to your comment about we don't all need to go to therapy to be able to do this work, and I do believe that. And I will say that any way that you can learn to access the emotions that are not always on the surface.
Hmm.
I mean, accessing your emotions and actually confronting them is really, really hard. It
Yeah.
it's just really painful sometimes, and it's really vulnerable in a way that sometimes does feel related to to taking self portraits, in the way that I do. And sometimes it's just a matter of paying attention to your inner world instead of your outer world, which is for a
Hmm.
lot of people inaccessible at the beginning when
Yeah.
they kind of start this journey. And so sometimes that means therapy. Sometimes it's journaling. Sometimes it's talking
Hmm.
to a trusted friend. For me, sometimes it is going out and taking photos. Singing is a way also that is a really amazing way to express emotions. There's lots of different ways to do it. And I think
Yeah.
it's really hard. It would be really hard to do this work and have it feel authentic if there is something kind of under the surface that you're not acknowledging. And I think you could
Yeah.
still create, beautiful work,
Hmm.
but if your goal is either to feel your feelings in the moment of creation or to have somebody else have an emotional response to your work, I think the viewer can tell sometimes if a work was sort of artificially created in a not in like an AI way, in an emotional way. If you
Right.
were just
An
creating to
emotional
create, I
way.
think that does come across sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that, because I agree. I think it's really important, and it's important for us to, or it can be important, depending on the kind of photography you're doing or the kind of
Mm-hmm.
art you're creating, and for you personally, if that's what you want out of your art is for people to
Mm-hmm.
emotionally connect to it, and you want to have an emotional connection, that getting in touch with
Mm-hmm.
your own emotional landscape is important to being able to communicate
Mm-hmm.
the natural
Yeah.
landscape.
Yeah.
Um,
And again, that's not to say that you need to have it all down perfectly. You don't need to be able
no,
to like dig in and really know I'm feeling this, this, and this, and here's why. I mean, that
right,
takes a lot of
right.
work, and I don't think anyone can do that with perfect accuracy. I
Yeah,
would say it's more, a permission to feel in the first
yes,
place.
yeah,
That sometimes, like
yeah.
we are as humans, we are very, very good at not feeling anything,
Hmm.
and that can become sort of a habit, and it can be a protective mechanism. I'm not saying there's no point to that, just that when it comes to creative arts, sometimes it helps to let some of that in.
Absolutely. Well, how can people learn more about you, see more of your work and what you have to offer?
That is an excellent question. I am on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Sara underscore at underscore play. So I talked a little bit about play today, and I really
Hmm.
like to embody that. My website is my name, sarakushner.com. I believe it is on the slides. And those are the two primary ways that I communicate, both sharing my work and also anything I'm working on, retreats and workshops and client photo shoots and all of that. I actually do have a limited edition print collection that is out now. It is called Seasons,
Great.
and it is based
Mm.
on a year-long project that I took on this year where I was photographing. I was taking self portraits every single season, and then I chose for one from each season, ones that really meant the most to me, I would say, from the year. And I decided to sell them as prints. I'm really proud of this collection, and I'm really excited about it. It means a lot to me, and every individual photo meant a lot to me to create. And so I hope that everyone listening and watching can find some meaning in it as well. I'm currently offering a 5% discount for viewers or listeners of this podcast. So you can use the
Oh,
code
thank you.
Pixels5 if
Woohoo.
you would like a discount. Woohoo! We love
Yeah,
discounts.
thank you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think your podcast is so inspiring, and I'm guessing a lot of other people do too. So hopefully this will help
Oh,
bring
thanks.
joy to the community. That's going on right now. I am in the very beginning stages also of planning a self-portrait photography workshop that will be kind of combining my two expertises, if you will. So it'll be sort of a body image focused self-portrait workshop. So we'll be doing a little bit of kind of talking about our feelings beforehand and thinking about things that might be barriers to,
Mm.
to having a positive experience taking self portraits. And then I will be leading a more technical sort of, here's how you compose the photo. Here's how I take my self portraits. We'll be in a beautiful location, of course. And so everyone
Mhm.
will have an opportunity to take their own self portraits with their own, equipment and all of that. And then we'll be doing sort of a I want to use the phrase post processing because it's funny because we will be both potentially post processing, editing our photos, but also processing mentally and emotionally the
Yeah,
experience of
perfect.
taking photos. So that's my photo pun that maybe only people listening to this podcast will understand. Um,
I
so we'll
love
be
it.
doing that. So it'll kind of be photography sandwiched with sort of the emotional, coaching format. I'm
Mhm.
actually teaming up with another dietitian who I really like and respect, who does similar work to me. So we will be leading the coaching portions kind of together. We're
Great.
in, like I said, the beginning stages. So I'm thinking probably in the spring or so of
Hmm.
2025. Wow,
Great.
2025. That's
I
crazy.
know. Who can believe it?
Um, Not me. So that'll be in the spring. More to come again on my website and social media. Yeah, like I said, I do offer client shoots if anyone's wanting to go to a national park in Washington State or anywhere in the world. I'm open, and also I love chatting with people. I just love connecting with people in a genuine way online, which I think these days is pretty rare. So feel free to reach out, via Instagram or my website or anything else. I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, I know from personal experience your warmth and your enthusiasm. I almost want to get out and do a self portrait. You know what stops me almost as much as just being in front of the lens is the tripod part. And people who've been watching
Mm.
this podcast have probably heard me talk about my allergy to tripods. So, someday I will overcome that, and maybe this will be
Okay.
an excuse to try it. So
Yes,
thank you so much,
absolutely.
Sarah.
And if you ever, you are welcome. I appreciate you having me. If you're ever in Seattle, let me know. I'd love to take you out.
Absolutely. And then you can
That
hold
would
the
be
camera. I don't
take
need
you
a
out.
tripod.
Oh, yes. To clarify, I hope it was clear that I meant take you out to take photos, but we can also like have lunch or something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Coffee.
Yes, and I'd be happy
Cool.
to be your human tripod.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let us know in the comments what was most useful or meaningful to you, and be sure to subscribe so that you're notified of future episodes. This channel is made possible in part by nature photography classes and their Inspired Creator Grant. You can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspiredcreator. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.